Welcome to the Hardwood Hustle powered by PGC Basketball. We believe in the value of a coach. We're here to educate, empower, and encourage you to lead like never before. Most of us know from experience what we see out on the floor on game day is the product of what we do or don't do in practice. As coaches, we can identify the habits we want to instill that will make the biggest difference. In this episode, TJ and Sam discuss building habits on offense, defense, and communication, intangibles, and preparation. Let's get started.
Welcome back to the Hardwood Hustle. We've got the whole crew here today, TJ, Lisa, and myself. And we're going to talk about how to peak as you go down the stretch, how to peak at the end of the season. And this is one that I think all coaches want their teams to do, is to be peaking and playing their best basketball as you head down into the playoffs. As I've been mentioning lately on some of the shows, guys, I've been coaching 3 teams this winter, and one of the teams' season just ended, and I just felt like I'm frustrated because I felt like we didn't peak at the end of the season. I thought we were ascending, and then we just kind of started having a roller coaster. And so, that is I'll reflect over the coming weeks and just try to discover, what I think went right, what I think went wrong. But TJ, I'll go to you first. You've had teams over the years, particularly probably over the last 10 or 15 years of your coaching career that seem to be ascending towards the end of the season and playing their best basketball. At the end of the season, you're currently on a 10-game winning streak heading into your final few games. So just start us off maybe with, just an overview of how you look at, a team and getting them to peak towards the end of the season. Then we'll dial into some of the nuance and details of it.
Yeah. Sam, I'm highly aware there's a lot of things I do bad. But if there's something that I think that I do well, I can't really even describe it exactly. But I think it's really important for coaches. I think that coaches love to have the answers, run this offense, run this defense, run these inbounds under play. And you should be searching for the best basketball stuff for your team. But the thing that I think is just really underrated and is super important to a team is being able to problem solve, and specifically in the area of what is the right feeling of your team? How should they be? How should they be showing up every day? How should they be? Just the attitude, the atmosphere. And I know it sounds a little bit out there because it's not so tangible. And I think that's why coaches have a hard time wrapping their brains around it, is because it's just not completely tangible. But I know what I want my team to feel like down the stretch. Now I would love for them to feel that way all year long, but I also recognize you're going to go through ups and downs and trials, and you got to work through things to get your team to this specific place. So if there's something that I really have never been that great at, it's really the beginning of the season, and I don't know if there's something I can change or if it's just part of the process that's led to us being good down the stretch. But I think that is the thing that I pay the most attention to. I think you could also frame it as what the heartbeat of your team, and I think paying attention to just feeling the pulse of your team. And so specifically a feeling that I want down the stretch is that they still want to be there. They're still excited to be playing basketball. I think you'd be shocked at the number of teams that aren't excited to be playing basketball down the stretch. I mean, I think easily you could say 50% of teams aren't still excited. There's a bad atmosphere. There's a bad feeling. So if you're one of the teams that's excited about playing down the stretch, I think you're in the top half of teams. I think that's just a baseline, number one.
Well, let me jump in there because I think that's a really good point. You said a lot of teams don't want to be there, don't want to be practicing. And then I immediately thought of, a lot of coaches don't want to be there. And so naturally that vibe, that energy they bring to the gym, to the locker room, to everything probably seeps out into their players because they're frustrated, they're worn down, they're tired, they're all those negative feelings, and then they're not able to compartmentalize and bring I don't even know if positive is right, but maybe an optimistic energy to the gym, to the locker room, to the film room every single day. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I'll go back to the first one of just like problem solving. Like if things aren't going good with our team, I'm really excited to be back in the gym with my team because we haven't figured out the solution yet. Like we still don't have the right chemistry. We still don't have the right level of execution. We still don't have the right intensity on defense. We still don't have, and so I think I just look at it a little bit different. Like whether if we're playing really well, like I'm really anxious to figure out like how do we add 1% to this? Like how do we get a little bit better? How do I challenge them today? If they're feeling good, how do we put them back in a place of challenge? And if they're feeling down, like how do we figure out how to get out of that? And so I think I just enjoy, and I think coaches should enjoy the problem solving of basketball, like figuring out how to do that. Because if you've got it figured out, like you got to stay on your toes because things are going to come at you. And if you don't have it figured out, you should wake up figuring out how do we figure this out? Like how do we change this situation we're in? But I do think you're right, Sam. I do think some people just kind of pack it in and feel like, oh, this team they don't have leadership. Oh, this team, they just don't have passion. Oh, this team, they just can't shoot it. Oh, this team just all of those are problems, which I enjoy solving. And I think coaches, if you're going to be good at your craft, have to some level, enjoy solving problems.
Yeah, that's good. Those are good opening thoughts, TJ. Let's go to Lisa. What do you think? Lisa, you've been a part of Division I teams for over a decade of your coaching career. What do you think about this and how to get teams to peak? What have you seen done well? What have you seen maybe not done well?
Well, just thinking back on just some of my experiences and a little bit like the new experience that I'm going through now, I think being in year 2 of a program is different than being somewhere where the head coach has been there for 15 years. And so I think you have to, like in my current situation, you're figuring out what works, like what doesn't work. What do you like? What do you not like? What as a staff are you concentrating on and focusing on, and like your X's and O's and all those things. Like your players we don't have any seniors who've been with us for 4 years who know what we want and know what to expect. I think that changes things a little bit down the stretch. We have a freshman point guard starting, and she's still making freshman mistakes, and that's a big deal for us as we get into the postseason, and how we navigate that, how we help her, how we call the right things that will put everybody in positions to be successful. I think those are things that I haven't necessarily experienced before. And I think a big part of being down the stretch, and I think what you were saying, TJ, of, being excited to be where you are is being present, being in the moment, and just enjoying the day, enjoying the next practice. And like you said, problem solving to wherever your team needs, right? Like, what does my team need from me right now? And there is a little bit of like kind of the dog days as you go into the, down the stretch of practices. And so how you keep things fresh, how you keep things, players motivated and get the team bought into what you're trying to achieve. And maybe part of this is it's hard when you're in a losing season, like if you say half the teams don't want to be there. Well, half the teams probably didn't achieve what they wanted this year, or they missed their expectations or disappointed. And so how can you turn that into something that they're still looking forward to? Like, okay, hey, maybe we didn't get the goal of winning the league that we wanted, but what's the next goal? What's the next? Why are we here? And I think if you can give them a purpose each day and be present in that, that can really help you down the stretch with whatever happens, especially off the court, but on the court. Like you want to be feeling good to be playing good down the stretch.
Yeah, Lisa, and I don't want to brush over something profound you just said there that what people might miss, which is why are we here? Like reminding yourself why you're doing this. What's our purpose? So great point, TJ. What do you think? Like as we're talking about this, here's something I'm thinking about. What about the younger coach who's not like Lisa? You mentioned the second year program, but like if you're a younger coach, when I say younger, you might even be 10 years in, but you're still younger coach, like in terms of just your experience, who you're still not sure, are we playing the right defense? Are we playing the right offense? Are my rotations correct? Like those are some kind of X's and O's science things. And then we got to like, okay, is my team showing up feeling right? Are we connected? Am I pushing the right button? Like there is just you could feel overwhelmed. So, TJ, what do you say to the coach who's feeling overwhelmed? Like, what are like the core things that maybe when they are overwhelmed, they can go to these core things and ask these questions to know, are we headed in the right direction?
Yeah, two things come to mind when you ask that, Sam. Like humility and fight, right? Like I just think that when we were talking a second ago about coaches that are just kind of ready for the season to be over and done, and they're lost their passion and their energy, like we would expect our players to keep fighting, but sometimes we're done fighting. You know what I mean? And so when I think about a young coach, even old, any age coach, really, I mean, I think about like you've got to be humble enough to ask questions, to have conversations, to know that you don't have it all right, to know that there's growth and learning. You gotta have that. You're not gonna fix problems by pointing fingers. And I think that happens a lot in coaching. Well, I don't have this leader. Well, I don't have this playmaker. Well, I don't have this, whatever it might be. And I think just the humility to ask the right questions and to constantly search for solutions to those things. And then the second part of that is just like you just got to fight. Like you just got to keep fighting, just like we would expect our players to do. Yeah, I came today. I thought I had a solution. It was wrong. Came the next day. I thought I had to ask more questions. Ask your players how they're feeling. Why are you not, bringing great energy to practice? Why don't I ever see you smile? Why aren't you in the gym extra? Why aren't you just constantly figuring those out? And I think oftentimes the lack of humility is the reason you don't solve the problem. Is because you just think it's not your fault. You think it's not, and maybe it's not your fault, but that doesn't matter. Who cares? You still got to figure it out. And then I think just constantly fighting to figure it out. And I think back to my first year of coaching, where we went through that same thing of 6-26 in my first year. I think it's our only losing season I've had in 20-something years. And I think about it like the last practice we had, I remember my dad, who was a longtime high school coach, and I was thinking about getting out of coaching. And I called him and he said, "Hey, go to practice today. Just try and run a great practice. And then call me afterwards." And so I said, "Okay, whatever," went and practice, ran practice. The girls were fighting like heck. They were practicing so hard. They were great teammates, and he said, "Well, what was practice?" I said, "Like it was every day. Like, they were great. We had a great practice and they had great energy and, they were great teammates." And he said, "Well, there you go. That's why you don't need to get out of coaching, because most teams in the country right now that have a 5-25 or 5 at the point where we were," he said, "they're not still practicing well. They're still not being great teammates. They're still not." And he said, you just keep fighting. You just keep fighting till the end. We had 5 wins, fight to win number 6, and then second year we win 20-something games. And I think it's really a product of the year before. The year before that we had a team that wouldn't quit, wouldn't give up on the culture, wouldn't quit being good teammates. And so, yeah, I would have loved for that team to be better, but I also credit that team for next year's success because they stuck with it. They kept doing it, as did I. Honestly, I kept fighting for it.
Yeah, and that's good, TJ, because that is an indicator, right? Like, how are you practicing towards the end of the season will reveal the results of a game can fluctuate sometimes, but look at your practices. I think that's a good message. And you said it, I think, in your opening, remarks is, like, do they want to be there? And I think that's a great question. Do your kids want to be there? That'll tell you a lot about where you are as a program. Let's talk about this, Lisa and TJ. And Lisa, why don't you go first? Is what mistakes have you reflect back? Have you seen made with coaches or leaders of a program? What mistakes have been made that now? Gosh, I'd want to avoid that in the future in terms of getting your team progressing and peaking at the end of the season. What mistakes have you seen?
Well, tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like one of the biggest ones in my experience, and maybe yours is different, but one thing that always tends to happen, it's just a natural thing. I think we've talked a little bit about before, human nature, but you're constantly fighting that desire to relax, to say, "Oh, we're good," to say, "I'm good. We got this." And yes, you want to have the confidence that you could go in and win the next game, but you need to have that edge that, like you talk about, still fighting. And I think teams that, especially, if you're in the top half of your conference and you're feeling good, and for us, it's just like, okay, we're fighting for that 1 seed, that 2 seed in the tournament. There's just this propensity, like, to relax, to not go as hard, to not, focus on the details as much. I mean, really mature teams, and I think this takes, leadership in your players, because sometimes, the coaches, for the most part, I don't feel like you can say, hey, you have to be on your game, you have to be ready. Like, until they really experience that, they don't know. It's like the tournament team that, you the first year or second year they make it to the final, but the next, they don't have enough to win it, but the next year they do, because they know what it takes. And so I think a lot of teams, coaches, players, whoever it is, we can either be naive or we can just relax and not realize it takes what it takes every possession to be at your best, I think. And so that's my thing that I've just learned, is that you can't relax. You want to say you're good. Like, you just want to have that feeling of, oh, we've won 4 in a row. Here we go. And you can't. You can't. You just have to be dedicated to the process every single day to be the best that you can be.
That's a great point, Lisa. Let's talk about that for a second, because I do think about that a lot. Like, I do think great coaches, great teams, they have an edge to them, and they bring it every day. Don Meyer used to say, practice like you lost your last game. And I think that's a great mantra, like, practice every day, because what happens when you lose a game? You're sharper in practice, you're more focused, you're more engaged, your attention to detail is better. And so when you keep an edge, and I do think coaches have to set the edge, set the standard, reset it every day, be relentless in that. Now, I say that, now let me contradict. What I want to get at is this, is when you're creating that edge every day, there's a little bit of grind to it. And then it can, if you don't do it in the right way, I think it can wear down the players. And I think that's one I want to dial into. So how do you create an edge, keep that every day without it just emotionally and mentally grinding down your players so much? Because I've seen that too. TJ, what do you think about that?
I think a good question for coaches to ask themselves towards the stretch or down the stretch is, what do you want practice to feel like today? And at the end of practice, did it feel like that? And so then, I mean, that's just a real small litmus test for, are we doing things the way we want to do things? And I think, to answer your question, my words match up with that. So, like, what do I want down the stretch here? I want to practice with joy. I want to practice with energy. I want to practice with intensity. And I want to practice with focus. And so if I stopped with, I want to practice with focus, I want to practice with intensity, and I just stopped right there, well, we're missing joy, right? Like, we're missing, that's a part of it. There's balance to that. And I think, I don't want to get long-winded about another part to that is reminding your team and celebrating them when they are doing that, so they know what the feeling you're looking for is. So something I might say to our team after practice is, that's it. That's it. That's the way we got to practice. I said, remember this today. That's the way we got to practice. And then we might have another practice, and I might say, that's not it. A lot of joy here today, not enough focus, right? A lot of focus, a lot of intensity, not a lot of joy. Whatever's missing from that equation based on what you want in practice, I think is just a really good way to gauge, because you can't go to practice every day just not knowing what you want out of that practice, especially the vibe. I mean, everybody knows what they want out of the basketball part of it. Everybody knows we need to cover off inbounds underneath. Everybody knows that. Welcome to the 99%. But we're trying to be the 1%, right? And so, like, what is the feeling? What is the vibe? What does it feel like to be a great team? And that's going back to what I was talking about earlier. I think sometimes people miss.
Well, hold on. So let's talk about that. You say joy, focus, intensity. I like those. Now, how are joy and intensity both being lived out? Maybe you can explain that, because I do think, and you'll maybe say this in here, with players, they would have a hard, most players at college, high school, or below, understanding how to live out both. Like, you have to talk about it, you have to define it, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. You know what? I do think coaches can play a big role in that. You know what I mean? Like, if you're saying great job, if you're high fiving people, if you're doing, like, you can lead the way a little bit there, of doing that. And you can also have your assistants do that. Like, my assistants do a phenomenal job of that. I'll just remind them sometimes, like, we have student assistants. Hey, I need great energy from you today. Just clap it up, just give a ton of high fives, and it just becomes contagious, like, because maybe I'm higher on the intensity and focus part. Maybe you don't have managers or student assistants, and maybe you challenge your leaders. Listen, I'm going to be intense today. We got a lot of work to get done, but you can't forget to celebrate your teammates. You can't forget to have high fives or whatever. So again, it goes back to problem solving. Like, I know a lot of times coaches think, well, I don't have this or I don't have that. I've had plenty of times in my career where I didn't have student assistants or managers, or I didn't have any of that, right? Like, I remember coaching by myself, no assistant coaches when I first got here to Emmanuel. And look, I had to play a different role than I play now. I had to do things different. I had to engage other people in different ways. But I think that that's what you need to feel. Like, even go to your first water break. Like, I'd encourage coaches to have a water break after about 25 minutes and really figure out, like, is this the right vibe or is this the wrong vibe? And if it's the wrong one, what are you doing to change it? And maybe that's calling a player aside. Hey, listen, we need to pick up this or that. Or maybe it's changing your own energy, or maybe it's challenging an assistant coach or something like that. But a few minutes in, you probably got an idea of whether you're off to the right foot, if you're off on the right foot or not. And what do we need to change to get it back on the right path?
Yeah, that's so good. And Lisa, how do take building off what TJ is saying? How do you enroll some of your better players or leaders? Hopefully, your better players are your leaders, but we've talked about that before. That doesn't always happen, because I think another part of it is those side conversations, those conversations right before practice, or maybe the night before you're texting, a player. How do you enroll them and empower them and get them to live that out and carry that out with their peers?
Yeah, I think it's developing a relationship with them in the long run, so that you know what they need and what they're going through, what you can anticipate. Okay, I think they're going to be struggling today. I think they're going to be coasting today. They're getting comfortable, and you can just constantly encourage them throughout the season. I had a conversation with one of our better players about this before the season started, of like, hey, how did the last season end? How did these things happen, or what was your mindset? And I think that it's a life thing, and so they have to work through it, and you have to call it out and encourage them to say, okay, hey, you might feel tired today, you might feel low energy today, you might not feel like leading today, but here's my challenge to you, here's where we're trying to go, here's where you step in, here's your opportunity today. And I think as a coach, obviously you have to model it first, because we don't always feel great walking in. And so we have to put our actions over our feelings at times of, just the day to day and what's going on. And so when you step out into the practice court, bringing your best, and that's not easy to do. Like, what we're talking about is not easy. Like, winning at the end of the season is hard. And so I think you have to celebrate it when you do it. You have to enjoy those moments. And I think that's where the grind comes in. If you're always grinding, you're always having intensity, it never feels good enough, even when you win, or you win a close one that shouldn't have been a close one and you feel bad about it. Like, you got to celebrate it. You got to enjoy it. You got to, those are the moments where you get to relax and, enjoy basketball a little bit differently than when you're on the court and you're working and you're focused and you're stretching yourself. And so I think it's a balance of those things, and just reminding your players along the way, because they're not going to get it right. You're going to have a conversation with them, and they're going to still show up, and you're going to be like, I thought we talked about this, but that's okay. Like, it's the journey that you're on, and you're helping that player figure it out, and you're problem solving. It's all those things together.
Yeah, and I would add something to it. It's never, when I talked about fun, practicing with joy and energy and intensity and focus, just to go with those 4 letters right there, it's not 25, 25, 25, 25 every day, and honestly, it's not 25, 25, 25, 25 for every team in different stages of your season. You know what I mean? Like if your team is really struggling and not playing well, you might have to fight a lot harder for the joy part of it, and you might need 50% joy in your practice instead of 25%, or you might need 70% of joy in your practice. And that goes back to the beginning of problem solving. And there is no exact right formula that you just stick with an entire year. Every day is different. You're on a 2-game losing streak, it's different. You're on a 5-game losing streak, it's different. You've won 8 in a row, it's different. And that's where coaching comes in. I know we'd like it wrapped in a box with a pretty bow, but it's not. And you're going to have to figure that every single day, how to make that happen. And it is different based on where you're at in the season, who your team is, what they're currently going through. Is it the day before a game or 5 days before a game? Is it like there's a lot that goes into that. And I think that's the challenge that coaches face.
So what do you think when you have a player who you feel like's pulling up from behind? Maybe they're a starter, maybe they're into the bench, but you sense that they don't have a lot of joy. And it could be 1 or 2 players. I know, TJ, you take a lot of pride and put a lot of effort into, role identification and getting people on the right seats in the bus. But what do you do when you're going down the stretch, in late mid-February, and maybe a player or 2 don't seem to be fully bought in? Do you address, like, how do you address it? If you address it, do you, if they're not a part of the main rotation, do you just kind of leave it alone? Or how do you approach that?
Nothing's off the table. I like saying that all the time to my players. Like there is no solution that is not possible, right? And so let's just say we have a player that doesn't have the right attitude and we've worked through it, and another week later they still don't have the right attitude. Now we're in week 2, still don't have the right attitude. This might sound harsh, but my conversation might go something like this. Hey, Lisa, let's just say struggling with her attitude. Lisa, have you thought about hanging it up? Have you thought about walking away? Obviously, you're having no fun. You're not very joyful in practice. The whole team can feel it. My responsibility is to the team, and I think the vibe's struggling because of you. That I know that sounds crazy and it sounds out there, but what's the solution for 90% of people around the country is like, how do we make it through the season with this person? But is that the best thing for the team, right? Now, I'll be honest with you. Most of the time, it doesn't lead to that player walking away. Most of the time, it leads to a stark reality that coach is serious and that they're willing for this to be over. And then they have to, for lack of a better word, they've been walked to the edge, and am I going to change or am I not? And so I think those types of, and we've talked about it, and it's a whole nother, podcast for us, but courageous conversations, speak the unthinkable, things that are hard to say, hard to stomach, but you got to have some of those conversations. And I think most of us just generally are wired in a way that we'd like to avoid that if possible. But is that best for the team? That's the question that you have to ask yourself.
Yeah, that's good. And that's bold, and that's definitely courageous for sure. And I do agree with you. I think probably a lot of coaches maybe shy away from that because, that could bring on a new host of problems. And I mean, I don't know. I think about that. What do you say to the high school coach listening, TJ, who's like, okay, well, if I do that, then now I'm going to be dealing with parents calling my AD and wanting me fired because they just talked my son or daughter off the ledge and quit the team, and he's an awful person or she's an awful person. I mean, I have a feeling what you're going to say, but I want to hear what you're going to say.
Well, one of our PGC coaching members, when we were having this conversation on one of our calls the other day, and the stakes are a little bit different in high school when players are quitting. What does that mean? How does that affect things? So I think it's a real question. I think it's a fair question as well. I think framing is everything. I think the way that you frame things and is not like, hey, your attitude sucks. Maybe it's time for you to quit, get off this team. Right. But you could reframe that and say, hey, listen, it's obvious you're completely unhappy, and I don't want you to be unhappy. And honestly, your unhappiness is wearing on the team. You think we should have a meeting, like you, me, and your parents, and whatever. I just want what's best for you, and maybe have the parents in and let the AD know beforehand that you're going to have this conversation. That hey, Mr. and Mrs. AD, my responsibility is to this team, and I want these kids to have a fun, joyful experience. And it's obvious that Lisa's not having one, and it's obvious that it's affecting the team. I'm looking for a solution here, and bring the parents in and say, listen, she's miserable. And honestly, maybe part of it is my fault. I don't, I'm trying my best, but she's miserable. And, I don't know whether continuing the rest of the season going on is good for her because of how unhappy she is. I know the direction it's going right now is not good for the team because I know it's affecting them. So I'm looking for a solution that would serve all people, and what's the parent going to say in that scenario? Yeah, we'll play her 30 minutes. Well, listen, that's not going to happen. Unfortunately, the person ahead of her has beat her out. She's not going to play 30 minutes. So the only solution for this is playing time. I'm not going to be able to make that happen. We're going to need to find another solution. And so who knows where that'll lead, but I think it's a fair way to approach it, and then you get to a certain point where it's like, look, if I'm approaching this thing with truth and grace, right, and I'm going to get in trouble for this, who cares? I mean, honestly, I'm just going to get to that point. I think most coaches need to get comfortable getting to that point is I'm doing the right thing. And if I'm going to do the right thing and that's going to affect the outcome of my job and my team or whatever, and I'm doing the right thing, then at what point are you just going to say, I'm just going to do whatever pleases the AD and parents for the rest of my career? That'll just wear on you. That'll just drag you through the mud. It'll just bring your energy down. I think God's got something better for you if you're in that situation.
Yeah, TJ, I think that was really well said. That right there is worth re-listening to probably 2 or 3 more times, and I probably will myself. Delivering truth with grace is a skill that coaches need to acquire. Because if you're going to be a good leader, and as you were saying that, I was thinking about some situations that came up for me this year. But if you're going to be a good leader, you got to step into those bold and courageous conversations. And you can do that. You can deliver truth and uphold the integrity of the other people in the room. And that's not easy. It's not easy when you have to deliver, especially truth that is a hard truth for the other person to hear. But you can do it in a way that does honor and respect the people in the room. Doesn't mean they'll like it. Definitely doesn't mean they'll like it. But you can lay your head down at night feeling okay that, hey, I've given my honest best effort to salvage this. And then lastly, I've got to put the team is it's always about the team. And the individual can't deter the team from the team. Lisa, what are some of your final thoughts as we wrap up here?
I was just thinking about, that feeling down the stretch, and it can be just knowing coaches, knowing personality types. Like it can be kind of all business and into the X's and O's and what do we need to do in this game and the playoff game and preparing and all those things. But I think what we've talked about today, which is important to remember, is just like the people aspect of it and the feeling aspect of it. And there's probably some players on your team and that maybe they look like they're dragging it down. Like you just need to encourage them, and I think sometimes to see young people as doing the best with what they know and helping them through these things, helping staff members through these things. But maybe it's a good time of the year to just pause and see who around me needs some encouragement today. Because it can feel like a grind at this time and we don't want it to feel like that. And so sometimes you just need to remind them, whatever that is of your values or what you're trying to do. This is a good time in the season just to remind people what you're really working towards and the value that they bring.
Yeah. Hey, look, coaches, leaders out there listening, I hope you got a lot from this. I know I did. And getting your team to peak as you head down the stretch is critical, and it makes for a more fun year. It makes for a more enjoyable experience. So be aware, as TJ and Lisa both share, be aware of what you want your players to feel. What do you want to feel as a coach as you walk into the practice, as you walk into games, and having a pulse on your team is key. So she is Lisa, he is TJ, I am Sam, and we are the Hardwood Hustle.
Thanks again for tuning into this episode of the Hardwood Hustle, where we believe in the value of a coach. Be sure to check us out on Twitter and Instagram at Hardwood_Hustle to stay up to date on the latest episodes and share your thoughts with our coaching community. From the Hardwood Hustle team, thanks again. We can't wait to be with you again next week.